everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have this great show on Dharma Parenting. I'm so excited to learn all about the idea of Dharma Parenting. And today we have Dr. Keith Wallace, who's president of the Maharishi University of Management. And we
Founding
excuse me.
Don't want to get in trouble.
Okay, yes. And we have Dr. Fred Travis, who I think is the director of the Center for Brain Cognition. Is that in consciousness? Are you still the president, the director?
Still the director. So
okay, good. So we have him on the phone. We've had a small technological miracle, and we're able to get all three of us on the line. So show us a picture of the book, Dharma Parenting. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what made you think about writing this book?
Everybody asks that question, and I think, for both Fred and I, we both have got families. He's got 3 girls. I've got 2 girls, 2 boys. I've got 6 grandchildren. Parenting is something which we both realize is so essential in life. We're both neuroscientists. We've both been studying the brain a lot, and it kind of came to us together. We both had this notion of kind of combining science and this knowledge that we had learned many years ago, Ayurveda, which gives an amazing, interesting, and new kind of knowledge on how to handle your kids. So I think we wanted to combine, kind of brain science, ancient Ayurvedic knowledge, and our own personal experience, and that's how it all came out.
Okay, so I am certified as a yoga teacher. And so in that yoga training program, they told us about Prakriti. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, very good.
Okay, so it's the idea of Prakriti, and that at birth we're given a composition of different elements, which you say your dosha. I think, is that the right? Am I using the right terms? Okay, you'd have a certain dosha, and that you are a composition of these 3 elements, either Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. Am I pronouncing? Please correct me if I'm doing anything incorrectly. It's been a while.
Perfect. That's great.
Perfect.
Okay, so they're talking about how we have this constitutional element, which is what your book is based upon, these 3 different, either Vata, which is air, the element of air, Kosha, which is it earth? Is that earth?
Yeah, Kapha. Yeah, it's
Kapha.
earth.
Kapha.
And then Pitta, which is fire.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a funny story, and then I want to find out about the book. So I was learning about Ayurvedic science, and I ran into someone at a cocktail party for when my children go to school, and he's a brain surgeon. And you know where this is going, right?
I'm waiting. I'm interested.
So an Ayurvedic person meets a brain surgeon at a cocktail party, and he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "Oh, well, I'm taking a yoga certification program, and I'm learning about Ayurvedic medicine. Have you ever heard of it?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah." And I said, "Do you believe it?" And he's like, "No. Like, I think all that stuff is hogwash." And so what I love is that you guys have actually been studying it from a scientific standpoint, because there's such a bridge between Eastern medicine, which people have been practicing Ayurvedic medicine for longer, and Chinese medicine for way longer than Western medicine, but people are so dismissive. So if you were to meet this guy at a cocktail party, I want to hear each of your answers. Fred, what would you say?
I would tell them that the 3 doshas in Ayurveda are structured on observed behavior, how people respond to different foods, how they respond to competition, how they learn. And I would tell them that as a brain surgeon, he knows that behavior is based on brain functioning. And we actually just published a paper a couple of years back where we take the body types and we suggest what are the style of brain functioning which is characteristic of these body types. And then I would tell them that he needs to look at the literature, because the literature has identified what is the different level of blood chemistry of the 3 body types, what's the different level of genetic expression of the 3 body types. And what it's allowing neuroscience and medicine to do is to respect individual responses. There's a whole idea of individualized medicine now, that people respond differently to different medicines, and the whole idea of body types gives us a way to understand why that might be the case. So I think that's how I would start.
Okay, so let me make sure I understood what you're saying. So, and what's so interesting is I'm here in Seattle, and so you probably are familiar with Lee Hood, right? Who
Yeah.
does this whole systems biology, and he actually has a health arm that he's starting right now. And what they do is they measure your blood and a whole bunch of other, like they're they're cataloging all these aspects of your being, health being, and what they've come up with is, hey, by the way, did you know that there's certain types of eating, eating nutritional guidelines that certain people need, and they're all different. And it's like, oh, brother. But that's what I think I just heard you said, right? That everyone is different. They have certain types of nutritional needs that make them different. And then you said something about brain. So what have you found in terms of when you're measuring the brain?
We're just actually engaged in that research now. But what we predicted is we looked at major systems like the limbic system, like the anterior cingulate, which is your attention switcher. And one body type, Vata, is characterized by movement of mind, very creative, physically movement, always changing thoughts and ideas. And so what we predict is their anterior cingulate, their ability to actually disengage and re-engage functions more quickly than in, say, the Kapha body type. Kapha body type is very methodical, very steady. It takes a long time to learn something. Well, once they have it, it's very much remembered forever, very positive emotions and so on. So their cingulate would be moving, it would stay on one thing.
And then what would just for thoroughness, like you talk about Pitta, yeah, what would Pitta be?
Yeah, Pitta is metabolism. It's fire, and it loves competition. It loves to really push itself mentally and physically to see how well they can do. The Pitta body type enjoys focusing. So what they would see is the anterior cingulate would go quickly to a place and would stay there and go very deeply into a situation.
Interesting. Wow. So you're actually, these are hypotheses of which you're still trying to prove out, correct?
Exactly.
And what's the data show so far, or are you just in the forefront of doing that?
We have initially just looking at Pitta, and it's not as though there's three separate types, but the types intermix. So we have, some people can be purely Pitta, which is metabolism. Some can be Pitta and Vata, some Pitta and Kapha. And we found that brain patterns actually distinguish those three sub doshas of Pitta. Now what we're doing is trying to get other people who are more on the Kapha range or the Vata range, and then we'll be able to report it in a larger sense.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to go back to Keith. If you met this brain surgeon at a party, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I'd be very sympathetic because I do understand. I was a young scientist in the 1970s, and I did some of the first research on Transcendental Meditation. And I went from UCLA to Harvard. And when I was at Harvard, there were so many skeptical people. I got up to give a lecture there, and the guy told me, don't tell them that stress is bad. They believe stress is good. Don't tell anyone it's bad. So, that was where we were at a long time ago.
Yeah.
And now, now we've done a lot of research. Fred and I have done a lot. There's been a lot done by other people. We had $25 million worth of grants from the National Institutes of Health to study the effects of Transcendental Meditation on cardiovascular research. So what I found from that is that people need to translate a very abstract ancient concept, and they need to translate it in terms of real research. So now when you look at research on meditation, there's all kinds of brain scans, there's cardiovascular research, people have models. You can work your way up from the fact that meditation will change you epigenetically. It'll change the expressions of genes. It'll change how different parts of your brain light up. There's so many, changes we see, how the different parts of our nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, the tone they are. And it took years and years for that research to come out. So I think the same thing needs to be done for Ayurveda. And it's one of those things where it started now. As Fred mentioned, one of the best studies that I've seen is an epigenetic study. It's looking at gene expression, and it shows that the pure Pitta, pure Kapha, and pure Vata types have different gene expression.
What?
So that's about, So that's about as good as you can get. I
That
mean,
is pretty cool.
yeah. So that's, I mean, to me, that's like major validation. Now they'll have to be, there's maybe 3 or 4 labs that have done that, and there'll have to be more. But I mean, that's the level we're at now.
Right.
Fred and I are very much into the brain research. But if you can believe this, the main thing about our book is about behavior. We talk a lot about how you can help kids and change their behavior just from very simple knowledge from Ayurveda and neuroscience. And the reality is there's almost no research done on the behavioral effects of Ayurveda. Ayurveda knows that the Vata kid learns quick, the Kapha kid learns slow. It's unbelievable. Nobody's done this kind of simple research. So we're gearing up to try to do as much as we can on this. And to me, it's like a field day. It's like an archaeological dig, into an unknown city. Like you said, it's been out there like Chinese medicine. It's been out there for a long time. Everybody knows about the herbs. They know turmeric has been, there's 5,000, 10,000 studies on turmeric, on its biological effects. It's a major herb, that's spice, that's used in Ayurveda. It's used in a lot of foods. And so it has, anti-cancer effects, anti-inflammatory effects, epigenetic effects. I mean, this is a very, very powerful food.
Right.
And we know now that food is medicine. We know it from these biological studies. We know it from studying the gut bacteria, knowing that that has a huge effect. So, I mean, Ayurveda is about to get out there, just like it took yoga a long time to get out there. It took meditation a long time to get out there. Chinese medicine has kind of jumped ahead, maybe because Nixon went to China and acupuncture and everything, and people got interested. And Ayurveda has just been dragging behind. It just, for some reason, has never really gotten represented in a scientific way. And I think it's going to happen in a big way in the next few years. And so, I think this guy has a reason to doubt. He hasn't seen the studies. He doesn't know. It seems like hocus pocus to him. You have to sit with him, and you literally have to go through each one of these studies. He has to actually read them. He has to take the time to read them. It's just like yoga, just like meditation. Nobody believed in it before. I think you could convince him if you had enough time, if you could show him a set of slides. For example, meditation is a part of Ayurveda. Transcendental meditation is a kind of like a vital part of it. So, if you can show in a study, there was a study done at University of Wisconsin recently, a 5-year study showing a 48% decrease in risk for heart attacks, strokes, and deaths when you compared a TM group to a control group. The TM group had 48% less heart attacks, strokes, and deaths. And these are all people that had previous heart conditions. So that's major. I mean, that's, you got to open up your eyes and say, wow, could a pill do that? Maybe a statin, a blood pressure, maybe a bunch of pills put together. But this is non-pharmacological. It's a simple technique. You do it 20 minutes twice a day, and it has a dramatic effect on lowering risk. It's going to be hard for modern medicine to accept all this. They love to resist it. They love their drugs. It's going to take a while to convince everybody that there's a new way at looking at life.
Okay, so question for you, Fred. When you see someone, can you? I was told that there's an Ayurvedic, really. I don't know. One of the Ayurvedic medicine dudes is here in Seattle. I'm sure there's lots, but he's supposed to be famous, whatever that means. But people go in and he can say, "Oh, you're Patavita, or you're kosher." Yeah, he can by looking at you.
Yeah.
Someone who's trained in Ayurvedic medicine can look at you and know what your type is. And the way that I knew my type was through taking some cheesy online test. So, which I think is how.
By the way, we have one of those cheesy online
Do
tests. We do, yeah.
I don't know if it's cheesy.
I'm not describing yours as cheesy. Mine was a long time ago.
You'll like ours a lot better because we've tested ours and ours.
Okay, good. Okay, so yours isn't cheesy then. The one that I took was some cheesy thing out of some, I don't know where it was. But so it sounds like I could actually take a test and ask a series of questions from my conscious mind, answering those questions, and you would be able to tell with what percent accuracy what my type is.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
and there are studies looking at that. And so, there's a bunch of studies in India which have compared when you have a real Vaidya, that's what they call the Ayurvedic physician. And some of them they shouldn't do it just on observation, but some can. They're pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they're supposed to ask you a bunch of questions. And if they're really a good Vaidya, they take your pulse. Pulse is a really interesting, it's something that the founder of the TM technique spent a lot of time working with Ayurvedic physicians, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he kind of revived this pulse diagnosis. It's there in Chinese medicine too.
Yeah, like someone takes my pulse before and then I get
Yeah.
really self-conscious, like, what is it saying about me?
Well, it says a lot. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very interesting. You can tell if you're in balance, if you're out of balance. You can tell if the vata is in balance, if the pitta is in balance. It's an amazing. I went to the National Institutes of Health one time on a tour with one of these very, very famous Ayurvedic physicians. He was kind of the top guy from India.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to visit the directors of the National Institutes of Health, and he took their pulse. And they were, they were also conscious.
Yeah, they're kind of
they
like,
were
yeah,
a little
whatever.
worried,
Yeah.
what's he going to tell about me? And he was amazing. I mean, he knew this one guy had kidney stones. He'd just gone through kidney stones. He knew another guy had this problem in his neck. And they were totally blown away.
But pulse alone, he was able to tell this.
Yeah, pulse alone. And I went to, the interesting thing, I went to China with him too. And we met with the director of the whole medical system there. And he had under him both modern medicine and Chinese. And he took his pulse there, and the guy was very receptive. He basically said, look, at one time, India and China, we exchanged everything. And so our traditional Chinese medicine and the Ayurveda, at one time they were very close. Buddha came from India to China. That's where you get Buddhism. Mm-hmm. So the reality was they exchanged knowledge at one time. So this is it needs to be revisited. But it is possible for someone to look at someone if they're an experienced Vaidya. It's not the best way to do it. And a quiz isn't the best way. It's much better to have a Vaidya, but how many Vaidyas are you going to find?
Yeah, how many Vaidyas are you going to find? I didn't even know the word Vaidya until you just told me. So that's my first problem.
There you go.
Just want to step back. How can the pulse tell it? Well, just to understand, when your heart beats and the blood goes out into the aorta, a valve closes and the blood stops, the aorta enlarges, another valve in the back closes, and then the first valve opens up, then the aorta settles back down and pushes the blood in. So when your heart beats, you actually have this rhythm of the blood going throughout the whole circulatory system. That's what they're picking up, that pattern of functioning that's happening in the whole circulatory system. And what they're able to do is experience changes the brain. So by taking thousands and thousands of pulse, what they're able to do is devote more of the brain tissue to process what's coming through their fingertips. And so they're actually seeing much more than just the bump, 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 which you usually get when you take the pulse.
So they're able to. So what are they able to see aside from just the in and out of the pulse of the heart? What else is?
Well, first I'll just show you. They use 3 fingers on the. So it's not just a one.
Can you put
finger.
it right in front? Because I don't know if my camera will shut it off. Okay, got it.
Yes. I don't know. Did I get it? Where's the camera?
Yeah.
Okay, like that.
Perfect. Yeah.
So you have to have 3 fingers. This is the vata finger here. This is the middle finger is the pitta, and this other finger here is the kapha. And so you put it. There's a little notch right here, and you go right below that on this artery, and you feel it. And there's lots of courses at our university. We offer courses on self-pulse diagnosis. The students at our university all learn this because it's an amazing way to monitor your health. You can tell when one of these vata, pitta, or kapha is out of balance, and then you can do very simple things to correct it. In our book, this book right here, there is a whole description in one of the appendices of how to do your pulse. And really, moms, one of the teachers who we learned this from said, moms should be doing this for their kids. They have 6 stages of disease. And when we recognize disease, it's at either the 5th or 6th stage. So they got 4 stages before that where they can tell if somebody is going out of balance. And then they can do very simple remedies, very, very simple things that can stop the imbalance from going to disease. It's quite sophisticated. quite amazing when you see it in practice. And some of the things are not very complicated. Something like sipping hot water can have an amazing effect. Or just, for a Vata type, that's very good. For a Pitta type, not eating hot food and having lunch on time. For a Kapha type, just getting out, having a little more activity. There's amazingly simple things that can keep kids and parents in balance.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand your train of thought. I would actually take the pulse as a parent and see. Okay, so let's say that I have I'm Vata Pitta. If you couldn't tell, I'm sure it was completely obvious to you, but I'm Vata Pitta. So let's say that my dosha is Vata Pitta,
Yeah,
and you went to measure my pulse, and you found that uh, I almost, when I took those cheesy tests, I almost have zero kapha. Like it's almost no kapha
sure.
at all. So what might I find, and what would I do if I knew my child's constitution and I measured the pulse? What would I do with that information? Give me an example of what I might find and what I would do as a parent.
Okay.
Let's start with diet.
Okay.
If you're Pitta and Vata, you're usually very sensitive to hot foods.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as a Pitta type, you need to eat on time.
Uh-huh.
And let's say your child is Vata, and the Vata child doesn't like to sit and eat a big meal. They like to graze. They like to snack throughout the day, and they don't mind hot foods. And so, how you're going to actually prepare the foods, when you're going to have the food for your Vata child, and also let's take it. I think the other way around is harder. If you're a Kapha parent, and the Kapha parent is very slow and easygoing, and you have a Pitta child. The Pitta child loves precision, being on time. When it's time to be someplace, they want to be there right on time. The Kapha child is more lenient in terms of time. In terms of food, the Kapha child can skip a meal and it's fine. So if you're a parent and you're Kapha and you're having fun outside playing, you may want to skip lunch or dinner. If your child is Pitta, they'll go into a meltdown because they actually need to eat on time. And this is what the book is doing. It's using the idea and understanding that people have different natural tendencies of how they go through life to help you plan behavior and actions, how you can understand why you're having some pushback from your child. And for me and Keith, where we have more than one child, how the children themselves may interact.
Okay, so I have a question for your Keith, or your kids or your grandkids. What's your dosha and or combinations of things, and how does that combine relative to your kids? I mean, give me some real life examples of how you've used
Sure.
this knowledge.
Sure, that's easy. So I'm a Vata Pitta.
Okay.
And Vata Pittas are generally kind of in our line of work too. And they're people who are creative, but they're very driven and goal oriented. So it can be an academic, an entertainer. You'd probably find most actresses and actors are very often Vata Pitta because the Vata gives that imaginative, creative side. The Pitta gives that very driven side. The more kind of calm actors, the ones that are sort of more steady, could be like a Pitta Kapha. And that would also be very normal. So me, I tend to have more Pitta than Vata. And so my kids all know, make sure dad eats on time. If we're having fun, we're out doing something, and my kids are not young right now. They're older, so they've got kids of their own. So they're looking around. We're all having a good time. They're all looking at each other saying, it's lunchtime now. You sure dad is eating on time? Because they know, I can get irritable if I don't eat on time,
Yeah.
So, and then, just here's an example of the two boys. They were, one of them, when they were young, he ate so fast it was insane. He'd be finished his food and everybody else would be kind of still starting. The other wouldn't even start till everybody was finished. So they were dramatically different, even if they totally love each other and get along. And, and they have unusual mixtures themselves. They're not, one is very kind of almost what I would call tridosha, which is you're all three are fairly balanced. But sometimes you get an expression in one area or another. And so you could be like more kapha, and they can sleep a lot for their sleep. But then for their food, maybe they're more pitta, and they really need to eat on time.
Oh, interesting.
And then for their emotions, they might be a little more vata, so they're highly creative and inventive and so forth. But if they get tired, they can get a little nervous and anxious. So, we all know who we are. We all laugh about it. And we all kind of get, who we are, and we enjoy it.
Right.
And, we don't try to blame people for who they are. We kind of recognize who they are, and we know we each have strengths and weaknesses. And it's not a system that's going to replace normal parenting, but it's going to help in parenting.
Right.
And it doesn't just help parenting. It helps every kind of relationship.
Yeah.
It helps, with your partner. I mean, if you know your partner's type, boy, that's huge.
Yeah.
And so it's like an amazing insight and a recognition of your strengths and weaknesses, and very simple tips that if you stick to, they avoid all kinds of problems in life. I mean, they had a lot of wisdom, this tradition of knowledge, a huge amount of wisdom. And Fred and I, we've just interpreted it, in terms of the brain. Fred can tell you very in precision, what happens in the brain as you go from 0 to 25. And you got to take that into consideration. Modern science has its own, contribution to this understanding. It knows so many interesting things about how the brain changes.
And just to clarify for people who don't know, from 0 to 25 is when your brain is there's so many changes that happen in your brain from 0 to 25. And so what you're saying is, so could I express one way when I was like a teen, and then if it's your prakriti, then it shouldn't really change, right?
It doesn't. But you get overlaid onto your prakriti. You get one. There's something called vrikriti, which means whether you're in balance or not in balance. So that's one. But then there is changes with age, even among a type. Again, Fred is a real expert on this, so he can explain it to you.
Yeah, this is the understanding that we have brain-body types. It's the fusion of neuroscience understanding and Vedic science understanding. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha is the body type, the body nature. The brain-body nature is bringing in neuroscience. And you're right that the brain changes from 0 to 25, but it also continues to change throughout life. The key point about 0 to 25 is there's a biological program of development that starts at birth and it finishes around age 25. And it's a biological development of increasing of connections. And this is primarily what happens in the first 3 years of life. The child's making 24 million new connections every day.
Every minute.
And thank you. Every minute.
It's really crazy. It's really
say
crazy.
that again. 24 million connections.
4 million.
4 million
every minute.
Jeez.
24 million connections every minute. And what it results is by the age 3, the surface of the brain, the cortex, is twice as thick as an adult's.
You have to imagine that when you're you're born with all the neurons, but they're not connected. So you have billions of neurons, and they all need to be connected. Some of them get connected by genetics, and a lot of them get connected by the experience. So kind of nature versus nurture. So this first stage of life is like, it's like fireworks going on inside your little quiet child. Everything. How do they move their arm? How do they speak? How do they do anything? They come unassembled. They got to get assembled. That's why they're so delicate.
Worse than an IKEA piece of furniture. Okay, so what happens? So what happens from? So let's actually map this to us. So my son, I'm pretty sure, is a kapha. Because he's slow, the kind of like, let's get going. So I'm a Vata Pitta mom with the kapha kid, like, let's go. We got to get into the car. Come on. And he's like, no, slow. And then I have another one who I think is a Vata Pitta. And I'm not sure if I think he's kapha Pitta, and I have a Vata Pitta. So what does this mean, what I can expect as they go through? They're teenagers now, and their brains, I don't even know what has happened to my 18, I'm 17-year-old Vata Pitta, but I'm convinced his brain went on vacation. Something happened. I'm like, what happened to your brain? You used to be like a rational person who's very organized, and now I just don't even recognize this child. So what's happening during the stages? Let's take the eldest, the Vata Pitta. And he's
Yeah,
like
so
17 years old.
so the full picture from 3 to 10, the child has this very thick cortex, twice the number of connections of an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when your child picked up language and rule-governed behavior, working in groups. And they also began to think about what they were doing. The 10-year-old's the ideal scientist. They love rules, and they follow rules, and they're very orderly.
Mm-hmm.
Beginning at age 10, a new type of transformation happens, and it's called neural pruning.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from age 10 to age 18.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is the connections they've used become stronger. The connections they haven't used drop off.
Mm-hmm. The whole use
And
it or
what
lose
is
it thing.
exactly? And what is emerging here is their sense of individuality. Because before that, the connections are so much, they're completely lost in the process of being with the family and doing things and learning. As the net connections become less, the person begins to think, how do I feel? How do I want?
Mm-hmm.
I would walk my 3 daughters to school. Up to age 10, we would walk hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
At age 10, they would only hold my hand if no one else was around.
Right.
At age 14, they wouldn't even walk with me. We'd be 15 feet apart. And I turn my head back, and they say, Dad, we're fine. Go on. And now were they acting out? Were they rebelling?
Yeah.
No. The brain connections dropping off. They were trying to understand, how do I experience the walk to work, the walk to school? What do I want to do tonight, and so on. So that's one thing that's happening. And at this time, the brain the child goes to bed with is not the brain they wake up with.
That's for sure.
And if the brain is how we make meaning of the world, how we have sense of self, this is all very fragile and changing. It levels off at 18, and so your 17-year-old is probably beginning to become more responsible and beginning to think in a more coherent way. Prior to that time, you ask them to do any complex task which requires more than one step, and they do the first step and forget the rest. And they're not rebelling, they're not acting out. It's just that that's what they can hold in their brain.
Okay, so my child must be a little bit immature because he's at the, I'm not sure he used to be that way, and now his brain isn't like that. Now, does the Pitta Vata or Kosha, do any of those things affect those time periods?
Not really.
Okay.
It would be other things, exercise, diet, and also DNA. The time periods we're talking about are approximate.
Okay.
There's one other thing. We're reducing connections. At the same time, the links of the rest of the brain to the front of the brain are gaining a fatty layer. It's called myelin. And this speeds up information flow. So what begins to grow, 16, 17, 18, especially in girls, boys are about 3 years behind, they can begin to put things in context. They can begin to think about consequences. It's usually about that time they begin to have big ideas. I'd like to volunteer at the fire department. I like to work with needy children. I like to do habitat humanity, because their brain is suddenly going beyond their family experience and beginning to realize they're part of the world.
I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, and what the key thing is, they don't have all the connections to the frontal part of the brain.
Right.
So you've got somebody who looks like they're an adult, who seems like they're an adult, and yet they don't have those connections to the frontal part of their brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is supposed to make all the good decisions, isn't online yet. And yet we expect them. I mean, I think the most crazy thing is how we send people out to college at the magical age of 18. And, they go from having curfew, they go from having all rules and everything, to going to a place where they're expected to party. They're expected to go crazy. And, it takes them 4 years of college before they even get slightly mature. And, eventually by age 25, this frontal part of the brain comes online. And at that point, it's much more reasonable for them to make good decisions. But, a teenager, whether they're 17, 18, 19, whatever, a lot of them are making terrible decisions. And it's not abnormal at all. It's everybody experiences it. And especially if these doshas or these, body type things are out of balance, like if they're vata and they're out of balance, their attention flips so quickly from one thing to another. You can't get them to focus at all. So they need routines. And of course, if they're college, what kind of routine do they get? I mean, literally zero. They can stay
Mm-hmm.
up all night. They can do
Mm-hmm.
anything they want.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not really helping them all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, if they're pitta, it also means that if they're out of balance, they can lose their temper, they can get irritable, they can be very disobedient. So, you're dealing with a brain that's changing, you're dealing with these doshas that are out of balance. I mean, it's a wonder we can communicate at all. And the reality is, the
It's a
reality is,
circus in there.
no, it is. And the only thing that's critical at that age is keep the lines of communication open,
Right.
because they actually need a lot more help. As Fred said, they've got to find themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is their time to seek their identity. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to ask for advice, but their whole brain is not connected, so they need advice.
Right.
And if they don't get it from you, they get it from their friends, and we know what that's like.
Yeah,
I
Lord
mean,
help us in getting.
that's a disaster. So the key here is to keep the communication lines open,
Mm-hmm.
in whatever, take an interest in whatever they're doing, try to get them in balance in the most subtle ways you can. And then, at that point, if you can talk to them, at least there's some hope, but don't expect them to be reasonable. I mean, they're just not going to be, they don't have the brain to be reasonable quite yet. Some go faster than others. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm. So when you've talked a lot about balancing, and so we talked about diet. So if and we talked about you and your kids and how basically you have a certain type of routine and when you have to eat, and there's certain types of food that are really good for you. Is that the only? And there's probably, and I heard you about sleep. So how would you figure out if you're in balance? Is it primarily the pulse? And what is the balance that you're seeking? Just so, because I don't know if the listeners know what does balance look like? How do you know when you're in balance, and how do you get back into? You called it rekriti or something like that.
Well, that's that. Yeah, there's the prakriti, which is like you've understood, which is your genetic basis. And then there's the vikriti, which just means how you're interacting with your environment. And
Okay.
so because the environment can knock you off. If you're a Vata person and you're suddenly subjected to cold wind, or you travel a lot, that will affect you. Or you eat diet, it'll affect you. If you're a Kapha person, you don't get enough exercise, you'll gain weight, all kinds of things will happen. So it's in play between the two. Fred, I'm taking up too much time here. If you want to add, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's very great to see you so excited, Keith. Yeah, my bottom line is if you're growing, you're in balance, just as a general rule of thumb. And in our book, we actually have charts which have all the different the three major body types, and what it looks like in balance, what it looks like out of balance, and recommendations that keep you in balance.
So give us an example of that. How would I know if my let's go the Kapha Pitta child. How would I know if he's out of balance, and what would I do to get him back into balance?
We'll go with a single dosha. It's a little bit easier to see, but in Kapha, they're solid, they're stable. When they become out of balance, they become too solid. They become the couch potato. When they're in balance, their mood is positive and warm and supportive. When they're out of balance, they're depressed. With Pitta, when they're in balance, they're focused. They're warm in terms of friendship. When they're out of balance, what happens is they become angry. Their attention becomes sharp and cutting, and their words are cutting. And in Vata, it's movement. And when it's in balance, they're the creative person. They're the person you want on your team, because they're going to see 10 solutions while you're still trying to understand the problem. They're very flexible. They can change. My wife is Vata, and it's a delight because she's always open. She's always moving. What happens when they become out of balance? They become anxious. They become as if overtaken by the sensory information.
What's your type, Fred?
I'm Pitta Vata.
Pitta Vata too. Wow.
Yeah.
3 Pitta
I
Vatas.
think Fred's got some. I think Fred's
He's a
got some
Kapha. I think so too.
He's got some coffee in him too. He's very steady. He's
I could
very
just,
even, steady guy. So
yeah.
I would add the coffee in there too.
Yeah, because as I was listening to your voice, I was thinking, what is he? What is he? And I thought it sounds like a Kapha to me, but then I don't know. I'm not the expert on this. I've just taken one cheesy test, so clearly I know nothing. I know nothing. Okay, so interesting. So let's say that you have a vata that you see someone, your kid being anxious, you think, or your kid being angry if they're a vata, or your kid being kind of depressed. So you see that your child is behaviorally out of balance. Then, am I just making sure they eat on time and eating turmeric? Like, what do I do when I see my children out of balance?
There's a host of things, and this is really a subset of Dharma parenting, because this is giving you the knowledge of how the children are acting, and this is our first tool. We have 6 tools in Dharma parenting. Mm-hmm. First is discover their brain body type, and then you can understand their actions and reactions. And these 6 tools match the 6 letters of Dharma. Mm-hmm. H is heal yourself. The key thing as a parent is you need to be rested, you need to eat on time, you need to practice meditation, because as children respond in terms of mirror neurons. They're copying what you do, especially in the beginning years. So how you respond to stress and adversity, that's how their brain and body are being programmed. The third one is attention and appreciation. And I wanted to answer your question in that way because we don't want to label the child as a specific dosha and then treat them as that specific dosha, but rather we want to be constantly attending to what they're doing now, because their brain is going to be changing dramatically. So how much responsibility they can take, how they respond to adversity, how they want to go on in their life, that's going to be changing. So you need to be attentive to it. I think this is the number one requirement of good parenting. And we say attend and appreciate, because it's not the judgmental attention, it's not critical attention. You're not there to control, but you're there to appreciate and understand their steps of growth. And so within that, you can notice that you'll see that what is the pattern that you see with your child, and what is the pattern. It's different in different seasons. In the summertime, Pitta is going to be more affected by the sun, and so maybe they can go without a meal for 10 or 15 minutes in the winter, but in summertime they can't. So you begin to see changes that happen as well.
Wow,
so what the dosha is, it's giving you as if a larger roadmap, and within that you're attentive to how they're changing. Maybe I'll just go ahead. Maybe we just finish with the other 3 doshas, Keith.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to do it?
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay. So this one on attention is an interesting one too, that I'll just say a little something about that. They've done studies, and if you look at super authoritative parents, the children obey, when they're young, but when they get to be teenagers, they get into terrible problems. Right. And same with too permissive. If parents, are too permissive, same problem. The kids, they get into problems, both young and old. Right. So, it has to be that kind of style where there are boundaries, but there's love in the boundaries. Now, the next one is routines. And so Dharma, D-H-A-R. So the R stands for routines. And routines is an interesting one because every parent knows you got to have routines, but different kids react to them differently. For a Vata, it's life-saving. A routine grounds them. All that kind of airy wind kind of gets grounded. And it's much easier for them to operate if a parent gives them a fixed routine. That just makes it easier for them, even though their tendency is to fight the routines, but they actually help them. For a Pitta, no problem. Routine is like second nature to them. They're happy to do it. You just have to set out the routine. Kappas actually get stuck in routines. So you actually have to kind of make it a little more kind of fun for them. You have to take them out and do things differently once in a while, because they can resist. They can just be a little bit, put the brakes on. And so got to get them out and move them around,
I'm just laughing because my husband, I'm pretty sure, is a kapha, and my younger son is a kapha. And we'll go, where do you guys want to go eat? And it's like, let's go to the same place we've gone for 1,000 years. I'm like, really? Please, let us just go someplace different. But I think that's what
we call that the clash or the collision of brain body
Yeah.
types. It's going to happen. That's
Yeah.
going to happen. And so then the M is for meltdowns. And every parent, wants to know what to do during a meltdown. And it's like one of the biggest topics. Power struggles are they happen. And if you're Pitta or if your kid's Pitta, they happen even more because those, Pitta's clashing. It's like two fireballs coming together,
Yes.
and it's not fun,
No, it's not.
So you have to, do everything you can to stay in balance. That's where the heal thyself comes in, heal yourself and keep your kid in balance. And when you get into a meltdown, we have some tools there, simple tools, like you just check in where you're at, comfort your child, especially when they're young. That's one of the first most important things you can do. And when you do that, you change their brain state. So these are the first 3 C's. And the second C's are basically giving them a choice. Once they're out of their emotional brain state and they can slightly reason, you give them a choice. Let them make the right choice. And then if they don't, you got to give them consequences. I mean, you have to stick to some, but if you can have family meetings, which is one of the big points we emphasize in routines, they can help make those consequences. And then, when they come up, it's not so hard to enforce. They're actually the ones that have thought up what they should do. If they do, if they stay out late, what happens next, And then finally, the last one is A for basically, it's kind of the final tool, which is both you have to anticipate. If prevention is the key to this whole thing. If you understand who your kid is and you can stop the Pitta from the fireball from going up into massive flames, stop the Vata from going wild, all over the place, and stop the Kapha from becoming a rock. If you can prevent it by just a few simple things, then you've avoided all the problems. So
how can you, okay, that's interesting to me because so going back to the letter preceding us, you're saying, okay, so the Pitta is going to get angry. The Vata is going to go all over the place when they're out of balance. And then the Kosha is or Kapha is going to be kind of like
stubborn.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some 3 things that you would do if you have your children in these states?
Well, again, if you can be preventative, if you can keep your Vata on a routine, if you just know
so routine is the preventative medicine for the Vata.
And there is food. We give food, and there's also like sleep. A Vata, that a Vata kid takes a long time to go to sleep. So you can't just turn the lights out on them. You've got to go through some stages. You've got to lower the excitement an hour or half an hour before. Take away the exciting games and television and videos. You've got to get them to calm down. So those are just some real simple. They're more in the book. Pitta kid, again, the key thing is eating on time. And if you get stranded, have some snacks. You just gotta, somehow that stomach and brain are connected. And that stomach gets super,
I'm totally there. It's like, if you don't feed me now, I'm going to kill someone.
I know. And the flames come up in a way you can't, watching them come up, and it's like, you don't have control. And you're going like, this is weird. How can I not control this? No, I'm fine. No, I'm not fine. So, that's.
I say, I'm melting down. If I don't have food in the next 5 minutes, so help me God, I don't know what I'm going to do.
And the Kaphas are sitting there like saying, well, no, we could take, a little longer, couldn't we? I want to do this.
No, I can't.
And the Vata is saying, well, I would actually rather go to this restaurant. Let's go 2 blocks down here and go to that place.
Yeah, I'm like, just decide. Someone just decide. That's what it looks like.
Decide. And then you can't overheat the Pitta kid. Water is their best friend. So, they need to swim. They need to, if they're too hot, they need a cold drink. They're fire. They just need it.
Okay.
So simple. And so that's for Pitta. It's really not complicated. And there are certain foods, if you avoid spicy food, that's generally the best for them. The Kapha kid is different. They actually need spicy food. They need to be enlivened. They need change. Okay, let's do it this way. Then you as a Vata have to help them and say, no, let's try something new. And they will appreciate it after a while. At first, At first there's some resistance. They want to stick to the old path.
Yes.
But then when they finally get to, go to the new restaurant, they think, oh, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Now let's
I
go
mean,
here for the next 10 years.
yeah, exactly. But they just need your help. They just need, that's why they all interact in very, it's like a team. Each one can help the other. And so the more you appreciate the other and the more you get, my Kappa kid is going to take a little longer. It's no big deal. I'll give him 15 minutes more to get ready for school. I won't expect them to be ready. And I'll stage it in such a way that, okay, now, come on out. We got to have breakfast now because they're going to take longer eating breakfast. And, now, come on, let's get all your stuff together. The Pitta kid's going to be in the car waiting, banging on the
Right. Let's go.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, and so, the Vata kid is off dreaming somewhere. So you definitely have to kind of, get them all to work together, and they can help each other. Once the Pitta kid understands the Kappa kid, they're much more sympathetic.
Yes.
Oh, come on, let's get Jimmy to get moving here, and I'll help him. So we're all different.
Yeah.
And a parent very often try to impose who they are on the kid. And that just never works. And it always causes chaos. And, it's like no matter how many times a parent fails at it, they keep trying. And it's just like useless. So once you kind of recognize your kid's an individual, and Dharma, that's this word Dharma. Dharma really means your own path, your own journey. So once a parent figures out how to help their kid on their journey and not try to force them into some particular mold, then they become more like a coach. That's the final one of these C's. And they can really, be the teacher, the coach, the counselor. They can really understand the kid, empathize with the kid, get what they're going through, and then be with them for that moment because they know they're going to experience the world differently than I am. So if I just got to get my mindset into their mindset and help them through this stage. And that's like a huge boon. That's why Fred and I love this stuff because it helps be a parent. Better parents. And we didn't do everything perfect either, but still it helped us.
So one quick question to finalize. Because part of this whole thing is that we have our inner nature, our prakriti, and then there are things that keep us unbalanced. And do you think that those things, I mean, as I understand it, they're fixed points. So is it to maintain what your natural balance should be, or is it also to kind of mix it up, because as a coach, you're just constantly trying to have someone grow beyond their natural tendencies so that they can resume back to wholeness, where they are kind of expressing all three of these doshas. Kind of, is there an end goal or not really? Did that make sense? I get confused.
Well, no, first of all, you have to have the premise that we all are a mixture. If that test didn't show you have kapha, it's just it's a cheesy test, and that's the reality. We all are a mixture. We're not one or the other. We're all a mixture. So there is going to be mixing up. And sometimes you could have kapha in an area you didn't even expect because most of these tests don't dissect it down to either your emotions, your physical nature, or your lifestyle. So we are a complex mixture. It's kind of silly to think we're one thing or the other. And there is an end goal, and that end goal is, fulfillment, happiness. It's having 200% of life, getting as much success as you can get, but also being a spiritual being, of being with feelings and love toward others. So, Fred and I have spent our whole lives trying to help people understand that meditation, transcendental meditation, is a key element in unfolding the full brain. So we definitely have an end goal, and it's to unfold all the good in you, all the best parts of you, and just, be aware that there are weak parts and you got to help the person with those. I'm sure Fred has another answer to this too.
That's just the core, that the purpose of parenting is to realize, one, your child is a person too, and two, they have natural way of life where they can grow and excel. So what you're doing in parenting is supporting the growth. You don't want everyone to be the same. You want people to be themselves. And you want them to be comfortable with who they are, know what their talents are, know where their sensitivities are, and you as a parent supporting that growth.
Lovely, lovely. Can you tell me about your website for people who want to take your non-cheesy test?
Take it away,
it's
Pete.
just it's just called Dharma Parenting. So DHARMA parenting.com. And right when you go on the website, you see the two buttons, one for yourself and one for your kid, and you can hit it and you get a 4-page free PDF report
Oh,
all
excellent.
about yourself. Also on the website are a lot of things from the book. These charts that Fred was mentioning about how to keep in balance, they're there. There's scientific articles there, a lot of interviews. If we have your interview, we'll post it there
Yes,
also.
yes.
And so, it's just a website that has a lot of things from the book to help parents be better parents. And, some things most of it's just all free. So it's just a
I
fun way to
love
get
it.
used to the book.
Can you hold up the book again?
I can, if I can find it here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much, guys. This was
Thank
really
you.
fabulous, fabulous, fabulous work, exciting work, and super helpful for parents. Thank you so much, guys.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.